As the scissors touched the red ribbon, my phone vibrated as if someone had squeezed my throat. A brief message from the lawyer appeared on the screen. Raid. Today. Do not cut the ribbon. I smiled for the cameras, because this shot was to be the cover of my new Children's Cancer Foundation, and at the same time, I felt a cold sweat break out. A second before the flashes clicked, two men in dark suits entered the room, and the entire crowd seemed to sigh in unison, quietly, like before a thunderstorm. I put down the scissors. One of the men held up his ID, so close that I could read his own name on the warrant, like a sentence printed in bold. Mr. Grigory, he said, and the microphone caught his voice famously. Your accounts have been frozen and the foundation's operations have been suspended in connection with a money laundering investigation. The children in the front rows stopped smiling. The mother of the boy we had paid for expensive treatment looked away as if my presence had been an insult. I tried to say something, but my throat was as blind as a closed safe. This is a mistake, I whispered into the microphone, which, of course, echoed throughout the hall. We are open to inspections. My partner Oleg, always impeccable in his tie the color of old wine, did not look up. He stood a step behind, like a shadow that had long since learned my contours and learned to walk ahead of me. Grigory, he leaned forward. We have to get out. There was no anxiety or shame in his voice, only the cold arithmetic of the situation. I caught his wrist, and for the first time in many years I felt like I was touching ice. The cameras clicked even louder than the hearts of the people who had just decided that I was a fraud. My mother called me, a bell above the noise, a childhood melody in a foreign key. Son, what's this news? Her words crumbled on the glass. Mom, I'll explain when I get home. A lie that hurts even before it leaves my tongue. I signed papers granting access to servers, to my personal correspondence, to my fatigue, which I had hidden for years behind jackets, and each signature was like a white nail in the shiny cover of my image. As we were leaving through the back door, a red-haired volunteer whose tuition I had once helped pay for stopped me in my tracks. Is that true? She asked, her voice less accusing than pleading not to destroy my faith in someone stronger than herself. No, I said as firmly as I could. The doors closed, leaving behind the spotlights and the children's applause that had already turned into the noise of social media. I got into the car and realized for the first time in years, I am richer than most, but now I am poorer than every truth I fear. Everything was falling apart faster than I could come up with excuses. The morning news began with my name and ended with my face cut out of the best interviews. The anchors, who had been polite and grateful for donations to their charity marathons yesterday, today pronounced my name as if it had become a symbol of decay. Banks blocked accounts, partners blocked phones. My team scattered, leaving cold, thanks for the opportunity, messages in chat rooms. I was still holding on. I naively believed that the truth would break through the mud. But the truth in business is not a light, but a tool. It is used to cut when you need to remove someone from the road. And now they were cutting me. Oleg disappeared. His office was empty. The safes were open. The computers were erased. The lawyers I had hired at the highest rates suddenly didn't have time. One of them, a former prosecutor, said to me straight in the eye, "You don't understand, Grigory. This is not a case. It's a sentence. They decided to remove you." I didn't answer. Because what can you say when you feel like your life is a chess game that you've been playing for years, but you didn't notice how you were replaced on the board? In the evening, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse. The city pulsed like the heart of a strange creature. Somewhere below, headlights flickered, and I thought, each of them has their own truth, their own fear. Mine has simply become public. I opened my phone, dozens of messages from journalists, threats, requests to comment, memes, videos, distorted footage from that damn ceremony. I clicked on the video. There I was, with scissors in my hands, at the moment when they told me about the raid. They paused just as I lowered my head. The caption, "A philanthropist who steals from children." I threw the phone at the wall, but the sound of broken glass gave no relief. Only the echo of emptiness. That same night there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. On the doorstep stood Dmitri, a former accountant whom I had fired 6 months ago. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I have something to show you." He pulled out a flash drive. This is what Oleg was hiding. All the fund reports, forged documents, transfers to offshore accounts. Your signatures are copied. I was silent. Everything inside me was screaming, but my body was calm, like before a storm. "You could have told me right away," I finally whispered. "If I had told you, I wouldn't be here," he replied. "They paid me to keep quiet, but I couldn't sleep." Then I felt for the first time that I had not lost money. I had lost myself, because I was building an empire of trust, but I had allowed a snake to make a nest in my heart. In the morning, the doorbell rang again. Only this time it was the police. "You have to come with us to clarify your testimony." Their looks left no room for questions. As I got into the black car with the bars, I realized that everything I had was not mine, and what was left would cost much more. The investigation room smelled of stale coffee, cheap tobacco, and the fatigue of people who had long since stopped believing in justice. I was seated opposite a man in a shirt without a tie, with eyes that had seen too much of other people's destruction. He was silent for a long time, looking through the papers, as if he were looking for meaning rather than a crime. Then he looked up and said, "You know, Grigory, I don't think you did it. But someone did, and you'll have to prove it wasn't you." His phrase sounded like a sentence without a period. After several days of interrogation, I was released on bail. I returned home, which now seemed foreign. The marble was cold, the paintings were empty. Even the echo of my footsteps sounded like a reproach. I was sitting in the dark when an unknown number rang. The voice on the other end was female, confident, but soft. "If you want to survive, listen carefully. Don't call Oleg. Don't contact your lawyers. Everything you say now will be in the prosecutor's office's reports before you hang up the phone. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, come to the old printing house in Podol." She hung up the phone. I left, not because I trusted her, but because I had no one else to trust. The printing house was neglected. The smell of dust and grease reminded me of the early years of my business, when I still printed advertising booklets myself. There, among the old presses, she was waiting for me. Alice, a former journalist. We used to meet on forums, but I hadn't seen her for about 10 years. "I know how they did it," she said without greeting. "Oleg worked with shadow funds through Liechtenstein. You became a cover, a white face that was supposed to inspire trust. They transferred money through your accounts, using your charity campaigns. Everything looked flawless." I stood there in silence. Something tightened somewhere in my chest, not from fear, but from the realization that every action I took, every help I gave to children, every story in the news, was part of someone else's game. Alice put a folder in front of me. Inside were copies of documents, transfers, names of intermediaries, even photos of Oleg with people I'd only seen at economic forums in Davos. "You can clear your name," she said, "but you'll have to get your hands dirty." "How?" "There are records. They're stored in a server room that only one person has access to, the fund's former IT director. He was fired after the scandal, and now he works somewhere in Prague. If you find him, you'll have evidence." I looked at her for a long time. "Why are you helping me?" She shrugged. "Because I was once paid to keep quiet, too, and I couldn't sleep for 10 years. When I left the printing house, it was already dawn outside. The city woke up, and for the first time in many days, something resembling faith appeared in me. Not in the system, not in people, in myself. I called a pilot I knew and said quietly, "I need to go to Prague. Today." Because if the truth was still alive somewhere, I had to find it, even if I had to burn with it. I flew to Prague at night. Autumn here smelled of rain and metal. The city breathed the cold shine of bridges and shop windows, and I, of my own obsession. In my pocket, a fake passport. In my head, only a name, Igor Beck, the former IT director of the fund. His profile disappeared from all social networks, but a person who disappears from the internet does not disappear from life. I found him through an old acquaintance from banking circles. He lives in Carlin. Quiet, afraid of everything, but for money he can talk. When I rang the doorbell of his apartment, he opened it immediately, as if he had been waiting for a long time. "I knew you would come," he said without surprise. "I need those notes, Igor. If I give them to you, I will not be here tomorrow. If you don't give them to me, none of us will be here." He looked out the window, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but make me one promise. If you survive, publish everything. Don't negotiate. Don't buy." We went down to the basement. There, among the dust and boxes, stood an old server, like a heart that still beats after the death of the body. Igor inserted a flash drive, and the monitor lit up. Numbers, documents, internal correspondence, transfer schemes, names of ministers, offshore companies, even Oleg's signature under the words. If Grigory finds out, we'll write everything off to him. I stood still. It felt as if I had been doused with ice and fire at the same time. It was proof, but also a sentence. I could have clicked copy right now, and everything would have turned upside down. But I knew. They wouldn't forgive me for this click. The sound of footsteps in the entrance hall broke the silence. Igor turned pale. They're already here. Who? Those who don't need you anymore. He only managed to whisper, take the flash drive and run, when the basement door was kicked in. 2 men in black jackets. I managed to grab the flash drive, break the back window, and jump out into the wet yard. The street was lit by street lights. Rain was pouring from the sky like it was shooting. Screams rang out behind me, and then a shot. 1. Igor fell. I ran, feeling neither pain nor cold. The flash drive burned in my palm, like something sacred and forbidden at the same time. I found shelter in an old hotel near the train station. I washed my face, looked in the mirror. There I was, but not the one the country knew. Different, with eyes that had seen the system devour its creators. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Everything was there, evidence, records, orders. And suddenly I realized, now in my hands is something that can destroy not only Oleg, but also an entire vertical of people who stood higher than I ever dreamed of rising. But publishing it meant signing a death sentence for myself. I sat in the dark, hearing only the sound of rain and my own heart. What will you choose, Grigory? Asked an inner voice. Will you save yourself or pay them all back? I took out my phone, typed a message to Alice. I have everything. The world will see this tomorrow. If I don't get in touch, do what is necessary. I sent it, and for the first time in many months I smiled. I was ready to die, but not to remain silent. The world woke up to my name. That morning, files flew online, hundreds of documents, correspondence, audio, everything they had hidden for years. I didn't expect fame, I just pressed send. But at that moment I realized, when the truth becomes public, it ceases to belong to you. It becomes an element. The news exploded before dawn. Banks froze the accounts of high-ranking officials. The media reprinted scandalous quotes. Oleg disappeared like a shadow before the light. Everything I lived for was now destroying those who had once stood by me. And even though I won, I didn't feel a sense of victory, only a strange silence after the storm. I knew they would come for me. Not immediately, but they would come. I didn't run away. I sat in the old room by the window, watching Prague slowly dissolve in the rain. I held a cup of cold coffee in my hands and watched the news lines run across the TV screen. The biggest financial scam of the decade exposed. The main figure is businessman Grigory M. It was funny. They still made me guilty, even after the truth. The door knocked. Not loudly, but calmly, like death that knows it can't be stopped. I opened it. Alice stood on the threshold, wet, tired, but with eyes that had no fear left. They're looking for you, she said. You can go. I have people who will get you out of the country. And you? I'm staying. Someone has to talk next. I looked at her for a long time. Everything we did cost Igor's life, and maybe a few more that we won't know about. The truth always takes its toll, she replied quietly, but it always demands a sacrifice. I went to the window. The rain washed away the city. The streets gleamed like mirrors. I saw my face in the reflection, without a tie, without a roll, without a mask. Just a man who no longer belonged to anyone, not even to himself. I used to think that wealth was power, I said. Now I know that true power is the ability to lose everything and remain human. She smiled faintly. You have become dangerous, Grigory, because you can't be bought anymore. We were silent. Somewhere below, a siren wailed, and I realized that there was no time. She handed me an envelope, a ticket, a passport, a key. Go. I went out into the rain. The cold hit my face, but for the first time in years I felt like I was breathing. The city behind me roared like the ocean, and I walked into the darkness without fear, because now I had nothing to lose, except the truth I had already given to the world. And then I realized the most important thing. Wealth is not something you can hold in your hands. It is what will remain when everything else disappears.